desires are at the planning department, and because ultimately we can make a statement about what we would like, but it's irrelevant in the face of what is legal or what they've already decided. And they feel that, I think, that they've decided their rules with, in consultation with us already.
I have a feeling that the position has not been established. I think we owe it to the neighborhood to make sure that that we establish a position that is defined and representative of the entire community and not just of you.
But we don't have a consensus.
Excuse me?
Do we have a consensus that we could?
Would we go through the process to develop a consensus?
I believe that we should go through the process of developing what the general position of the community is and not assume that it's already been established.
Well, we've done it and then we revised it. So for example, when I was on the land use committee originally back 2.5 years ago, we made a statement regarding affordable housing. And then in the process of the what do we call that, when we had the meetings? Yeah, where we had sort of different meetings in different locations, and it was.
Oh, that was the future of the Frogtown.
That was the future of Frogtown. So distinctly, when there seemed to be from the community a sense that if affordable housing meant high density, they didn't want that. So it seemed to be that lower density trumped affordable housing. But both of those were made as desirable, but they're inconsistent with each other.
Is there currently a statement of purpose document that exists that was ever supported by the neighborhood council? How recent ago? Perhaps use that as a starting point. Look at it.
Yeah, so the question would be, should we re-examine it and do it again? Not that it hasn't been. So yes,
So
I think we should look at existing documentation and then see if it meets the current.
Who has that documentation?
Well, certainly it's written up in Future of Frogtown. We have our letter that we sent to the Planning Commission way back when that did such things as, remember the one that we submitted it that was our advice on the queue conditions?
Oh, yes.
And it contained position on things like height, density, types of businesses, etc. So yeah, there's that document. No Tracy keeps everything.
To address
Put your finger on that?
Maybe we
Sorry,
can get some homework on this.
to address the question of affordable housing, and with these new projects coming into our neighborhood, I think density has been the number one concern. These projects coming in are not really interested in providing affordable housing, and if they do, it's a very small percentage. So the density will increase, and the ability to help the working class, the poor people, is not going to be addressed by these new projects.
It's going to be very hard to, the horse has left the barn to some degree. The new change in the queue conditions will dampen density by a considerable amount, and it will make affordable housing probably an impossibility.
Right, and because we cannot enforce that, then what is it in the interest of this community to support and to support these projects?
Well, the queue conditions went through a long process, and they were, the city council voted it right now? So they're a done deal, and they consider that a kind of a major process to have changed the zoning without doing a full specific plan. So they figure that this will last years at least, right? It's not amenable to change at this point. So, and the planning department considers the queue conditions to be in response to several years of community pull.
Okay.
And so just to respond to that, if I consider myself to be somewhat informed and I still don't understand the position.
Of the
of-
air
of the-
conditioner?
No, well, yeah, that and just, you know, this whole deal with development in general. And I still find myself really learning, what do we expect the majority of the population at Elysian Valley to know? And so therefore, we need to be more informed in order to create a more representative position of what we want here at
I
Elysian
think
Valley.
that you make a good point, that it might be useful to summarize the queue conditions for the layperson, and put it in some kind of, public documents that are available to people, that just sort of tells people what has changed. I don't think most people realize that. So for example, the IMBO project, let's see, it's under 30 feet, isn't it? No, it's not, okay, so.
36 inches.
Okay, so the BIMBO project is going to be as tall as it is going to be today. The density, I think, is okay on that one, is that right?
And do you understand what he means by that? The reason it is the height it is because the queue conditions weren't in place at the time that they started their
The new queue
project.
conditions.
The new queue conditions were not in place when they started their project. So now that those are in place, all of the projects that have not yet started and are not in the pipeline do have to adhere to the height limit and density and other things.
So it does
Just
seem
so
like
you
the
understand.
purview of this committee to clarify that for the neighborhood.
But the queue conditions is only for a designated sector of the entire frog town, which is like 1/10 of the neighborhood.
True.
So we're talking 1/10 of the neighborhood versus everything
Yes,
else.
but that 1/10 of a neighborhood can give rise to hundreds of
Oh, no, no,
buildings. So
no,
let's not diminish the.
No.
Thousands.
Let me finish
Let's
my,
not diminish the size of, the argument.
I'm not diminishing them. I'm just kind of restating everything. Queue conditions is 1/10 of a community. So.
We could also address the other.
And maybe we can look at like which lots are single family, double family. Is there a height limit outside of the queue condition area? What about all the other areas? Because this is just one section, so that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that one
Yeah, and
section
I think you bring up a
totally
good point.
impact.
If we could
One
turn
of
this
the
into
things-
we can plot out
easy
the-
document.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been made aware of is that I believe all the houses on the other side of Blake from the river are R2.
Right.
At all.
Many of them are.
Many of
There's
them.
a Churchside portion.
Many of them
Many
are.
are,
And
many are.
if those houses were to be rebuilt,
Right. What's the height limit?
they would be much higher.
45 feet.
Could be 45 feet. So that's not to say that that would happen, but I'm guessing that some of the older homes may be, not victim to, but part of some sort of redevelopment or some sort, and I don't mean it that way, by some sort of development that might then fall under a new set of rules or a set of rules that allow for great heights on the other side of Lake and throughout the other 9/10ths
Right.
of the neighborhood.
Well, I think we're coming up to something that we maybe have failed to do, which is to simply make what is possible right now clear in simple terms so that people understand it before they make any comment about it. And that, of course, the zoning department feels like they have a plan or map that makes all that clear, but it's pretty opaque to the average person.
Is it something that's, we would feel is worthwhile to summarize the queue conditions into the salient points and any other laws that sort of overall pertain to height limits and density and that sort of thing into what could be a 15-minute presentation and/or, I suppose, set of documents? Not, this is one thing and it's 40 pages, but something that is clear enough, it's presentable, it's something that could be presented at any kitchen table. Is that something that we want to tackle?
Well, Tracy, you're an architect.
Well, clarifying queue conditions and highly technical issue that impact the development that is going on here at Elysian Valley, I don't think is, well, I mean, it will be good for the people, the laymen to understand, but how is this going to address the position that we will take in reference to development?
My personal opinion
Inform us.
is that
To take a
our
position.
mission should be more to keep everybody informed and aware, not to try to be advocates on a very deep level, because it's almost impossible to get consensus.
No, I understand, but I sort of disagree with you, Colin. I think we are representing our neighborhood, and we should be advocating for what the majority feels is the most important part.
That's
or
right.
The most important path for our neighborhood. We should be advocating for these things, even if a small number does not agree with my position.
No, that's what this means, it's not a small number, it's, we would have to get what the overwhelming opinion
Right.
is.
Yeah, we just need information to come up with a purpose, to make an informed statement. That's how I think that's on the table here, it's just, I mean, because the key conditions is one piece, like what percentage are single-family lots, what percentage of the neighborhood is double, what percentage is, I mean, do we have any idea of like how many of our, you know, like on Knox Avenue, there's 3 houses that are being torn down. Are they gonna be apartment buildings, are they gonna be 4 units? Like, those are just simple things that, if we just need more information to inform the density, but your point is really well taken as far as informing density. Because Q conditions is one piece, but the 9/10 of the rest of the neighborhood can really impact us even more so. I think we should just at this time just kind of put it on there to gather more information, maybe just get like, what you're saying is like having some sort of a user-friendly snapshot of where we're at as a community, so we're informed.
Well, I mean, if you live on a street
Yeah.
where they're tearing down 3 houses and
Right.
you don't know what's happening, and
Exactly.
you're on this committee.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
So the question would be, are you not informed? I mean, anybody can go to
Right.
the city website and figure it out in theory.
Right.
So you haven't done that, or you did it and you couldn't really make it out? Which one?
No, I'm just saying, putting it out there. These
But
houses,
I mean, have you?
have I
made it
researched,
yet?
have I researched it recently? No.
So
No,
I don't
but
know
I'm
how
saying that
easy
this
or
is
hard
what-
it is.
No, but I'm saying, but it's going on throughout the community, yeah, I mean, that's what I'm just saying, do we even know what's there?
So is it better to train people how to find the information because it's available on the website of the city, or do we have to reinterpret that?
Should be here at this board.
Yeah.
No, we don't have the
Please, no
skills.
dialogue.
Right.
If we can.
We don't really have the skill set to.
I'm just throwing it as a supposition.
So-
Might as well take it. How would you find it? I'm just trying to bring it down to a case example.
Yeah.
And I think, how do you find it, how do you present it, seems to me to come before, what do you do with it?
Right.
And what do you do with it is, if everybody needs to vote and say, we want this, or we want this, or we want this, do we want only tents in this area, do we want 3-story buildings in that area, or whatever? There are laws that are already in place, and so a popular vote is going to do, it's not gonna change the laws necessarily, because the laws are, not necessarily, but I think, I would like to think that this group could come up with something that does get information out to more folks to help them understand both what's coming and what they might be able to do about it. How that manifests itself, I'm not sure. That's sort of why the question comes up. It seems like there's both an emotional and a very theoretical, or not very theoretical, but a sort of an altruistic, this is what we want, but here's where we are, and here's what's happening, here's what the laws are that say what we can do with all of that stuff. So that was the purpose of discussing this, and so,
I like to believe that as a community, we still have the power to send a message to our politicians that we can still
oh, I'm sure.
curb some of these projects that are not really beneficial for our community.
But that's part of the problem too. If we don't, if all we do is come up with a position and we don't participate in the process of reviewing projects that come into the neighborhood or want to come into the neighborhood, then we've basically said, okay, fine, I can't do anything because I've chosen to sit on my own hands.
Well, and that is one of the reasons why I am participating. I'd like to send this out to the public so that we can be better informed and be actively participating, whereas before we weren't. Now we're doing it, so that's what I'd like for us to.
Well, before
Very actively.
Before to now, I think a lot has happened, and a lot of work was put into helping promote the queue conditions or get the queue conditions into something, because if they weren't in place, if they didn't change, there'd be a lot more unhappy people at these meetings. So I think work has been done. Part of the reason I hoped that we could have this discussion was that to come up with a blanket, no more this, or yes, we want that, it's a little too black and white. It sort of vetoes the process that we already have in place. Where this land use committee used to entertain, and I use that term very loosely, we would have developers come in and they'd make presentations, and we would review those presentations. I was not on that committee. But those projects were reviewed and changes were made, and those changes are part of what's happening at Bimbo. From what I understand, and I'm not necessarily a pro-Bimbo person, but from what I understand, they originally came in with 180 units.
Oh, more than that.
I think it was 180 on one side and 17 or 18 on the other side. And throughout the time that they have been discussing things with this land use committee, the previous one, that got dropped to 100 units, I believe, and still 14 or 15 or something across the street. So they listened, and we had an impact. And I'd like us not to forget that we can have an impact, and there already is a process to make that happen. And that's why this discussion tonight. So I don't know if coming up with one single position is the right thing, or beefing up the use of this committee to entertain, to discuss, to admonish, to suggest, to have you folks come in and be part of the process to say, no, I really don't want that. I mean, wouldn't you rather have the voice than not? I would. I'd rather have the voice. And just personally, the building next to us sold for whatever it sold for. It's now been flipped. They can go up 45 feet. My roof.
No, they can't. We have new queue conditions.
I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. 36 feet?
30.
30 feet. All right. So they're only 15 feet above my roof.
But it went from 45 to 30.
I know. But I'm saying, looking at it from where it could have been to where it is, it's still 15 feet over. So we are impacted. A lot of us are impacted.
And ultimately, developers can choose to come to this committee or not come to this committee. And the more legitimate we are, the more likely we are to engage people to come to our committee. If we, take all the things in account, or they can just say, we're not going to go, because they're going to want our endorsement, I would assume, going forward with the money of the planning committee. They can choose to come or not. I mean, oftentimes we say we don't even know what's going on in the community, because not everything goes through.
There is no requirement that any developer come to.
And that's important that, I just remember, there's no requirement that a developer comes through this committee.
It's
What?
not your entitlement.
Sorry?
Unless they're asking for an
Right,
entitlement,
right.
then they do. Yeah.
Still in the advisory.
We're an advisory, we want to we want to stay engaged in the advisory process.
Do we have any more discussion here? Should we open it up to public comment for a moment?
Just one final thing, I don't want you guys to assume that I am anti-development. I know development happens and has happened throughout history, but we want to be able to bring in development that will benefit the community more so than just bringing in development that will give a creation to these hundreds of units per lot. That's what we're totally against, because we don't want that type of density. We need to get the people involved in the process. I hate to see just 6 of us make the decision, I think we should get everybody more involved in the process, and so that we become more legitimate. And that's what I want to finish with.
Can we open it up for public comment? If you got a minute, then we're gonna wave this crazy sign at you. So, please, Ceci?
Well, with all due respect, with the inconsistencies that are up on the board here, with questions sort of being variable and not knowing, and you're the experts of our community that we look forward to hearing from, the community themselves are quite confused, and I believe we should start with a list. There's a list that goes, that says there's a permit taken out on this day, and it's listed, and are we following those? I know you're not gonna be able to work on every one of them, but if we had a list of what is actually being done in our community, and that way people themselves would be able to be empowered with the information. Second of all, packets are thrown at them, and the packets are quite big, and if you're not familiar with this information, you're not gonna know how to read it, you're not going to understand it. So maybe a brief summary of each one of these projects, as to what it is. I'll give you, for instance, Mission Lab, for instance, down the street. What will that be? That's down the street for me. It's going to be a bar. If it is, 2 in the morning, they'll be open next to a home, and I can't complain, debit permit. Next to
Thanks, Ceci.
residential.
That's good, Tracy?
There's a part of me that wants to suggest that this committee takes a overall stance that says that you are opposed to any development that adds occupants or cars on the street until, this is the important part, until the city puts in place a plan to mitigate or to address the deficiencies in this area, both in infrastructure and traffic. And I think that could be a very clear, very simple position that the committee takes, that's on the website, that just says, look, we recognize we have these issues and the city's not doing anything globally to address it, and so therefore it's the position of this board to just straightforward oppose these projects. I think that would make your life very easy. I think it would make maybe some people very happy, I'm not sure, in the neighborhood. And my only actually fear about that is whether that means that people just simply won't come before the board because they already know the